Hi, welcome to Apron Improv. Today what I'm going to be teaching you how to make is a scone. Not just any scone, but a gluten-free scone that actually tastes and looks just like something that would be not gluten-free. What I'm choosing to use today are a variety of dried cranberries and also white chocolate to go in my scones. What I'd love to hear from you guys is how your scones turned out. If you can do us a favor, subscribe, like, and share this page with your friends and with your family so that we can continue to provide more awesome videos for you to learn from. So let's get started making scones. So what I have to start here is gluten-free types of flour. So the flour that I'm choosing to use today is a brown rice flour. The other two binding agents that you need whenever you're baking gluten-free is a tapioca starch and a potato starch. So I have those two things in this bowl as well. So I have 1 1/4 cups of brown rice flour. I have 1/3 cup of the potato starch, and then I have a little less than 1/4 cup of the tapioca starch. So we're going to put them into my bowl. Spatula. You know, you can always buy an all-purpose gluten-free baking flour. That works just as well. I've used 2 different kinds and they've always turned out to be very similar. So I've just found that this is kind of a good makeup for this recipe. The next thing that I'm going to put in here is baking powder and salt, which I already have measured out in here. This is 1 heaping tablespoon of baking powder and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So sprinkle that in as well. Then the next thing that you must use in gluten-free baking is your xanthan gum. So this is a little bit expensive to buy in a grocery store, but a little bit goes a long way. So whenever you do buy it, you're going to have enough to make tons of gluten-free recipes. So this becomes very, very tacky. Whenever you put this in a recipe, you want to make sure that it is very well incorporated in your dry ingredients before adding any liquid, or else it will literally gum up and will be this big sticky blob that you can't do anything with. So next I'm going to add my sugar. This is 1/4 cup. Put that in there. And then I'm going to use my coconut oil. You can also use any kind of fat that you want to use in this. You can use shortening, you can use butter, or you can use coconut oil. I would probably stick to those 3 versus other varieties because you're baking with it, and to keep that kind of light, fluffy consistency, you wouldn't want to use olive oil. That would become a little more dense than what you want for a scone. So we'll get that in there. This gadget that I have here, if you've never used one before, they're really handy. Normally I use this when I'm making pie crust, and this is just a hands-free way of cutting your shortening into your dry ingredients. So all you have to do is just kind of work it around here like this, and it will mix your dry ingredients as well as using as well as getting your shortening or your fat or your coconut oil well incorporated into your mixture. Kind of brush it off the sides because sometimes it sticks, and keep going. I love this for pie crust, side note, because you know pie crust is only flour, salt, shortening, and water, and you have to have a lot of fine shortening crumbs to get that good flaky consistency. So the same thing in a scone, they need to be light and kind of flaky. You know, a scone is kind of the cross between a cookie and a muffin, and I think they're better than both of them actually. So anyhow, so well incorporated fine crumbs of shortening, you can see, and it smells delightful. In this cup, I have 1 cup of liquid. This can be an almond milk, it can be a coconut milk, it can be regular milk, same quantity all the way around. So slowly incorporating this. Fold your dry ingredients into your wet ingredients as you go. gonna kind of mix this in here. Now, if you bake a lot, you'll notice that this texture is different than standard baking. You'll think, oh my gosh, this is way too wet for what I'm used to baking with. But I assure you, it's actually not. Gluten-free is different. So if you're not used to it, you'll just have to give it a try. Seriously, trust me when I say, like, you'll think it'll look too sticky. Yes, it will stick to your parchment paper, but it's gonna be okay. So the xanthan gum will start to bind here, and then it will actually look a little bit more solid too. So if you can see how it looks kind of like too liquidy to be some sort of cookie thing, but it's a little bit like thick batter. This is perfect. When I take my spatula up, it still holds a form, but it kind of sinks back down into the dough itself. So keep it like this. The two things that I'm choosing to use for my scones today are white chocolate chips and cranberries. So you can go ahead and sprinkle them in. You can do this with other types of fruit too. If you wanted to use raisins and dates, if you wanted to add walnuts to these, if you wanted to do blueberries, like fresh ones or frozen ones or dried ones, I think that they would probably all work. I will say that when you use fresh fruit in these, which I have done, I make blueberry scones all the time, they're a little bit wetter as well. So like when these are done baking, I like to sprinkle them with powdered sugar just to make them look pretty. And it kind of gives them a little taste, it makes them nicer. But on like fresh fruit ones, the powdered sugar won't stay. It will just kind of sink into your actual scone and you won't see it as much. So this is the raw batter then for my cranberry and white chocolate scones. Yeah. Okay. What I'm gonna do next is I am going to put this right on top of some parchment paper, which I've already laid out. And I'm gonna kind of shape it into a disc. You wanna let this sit in your refrigerator too for at least 30 minutes. Because you have to let that fat reharden before you put it in the oven. So just kind of putting it into a disc shape. Scrape this off. So I'll just simply like fold this up and I'm gonna stick it in my refrigerator and let it sit for 30 minutes. And when I come back, I am gonna cut it up into slices and put it on a baking sheet and pop it in the oven. It's been 30 minutes with our scone dough in the refrigerator. And so the oil has had a chance to harden. So I have a really big knife because that's how I like to section off these scones. So again, I have a spatula because this dough is a little bit stickier than traditional dough. Not too bad though. And that's also a reason why I wrap it up in parchment paper, because when it does stick, it doesn't stick too badly. So pulling this apart, see how this is set? It's all kind of chunked up by itself. So again, I'm gonna just shape that into a prettier disc. And then I'm going to cut it in half. And then I think I will make 6 of these. You can make it into an 8. I just like the size of having 6 of these. So sometimes I do a double batch. It depends on how many people I'm planning on feeding. For just my immediate family, 6 is plenty. If you want to make them a little bit smaller, then definitely make 8. So if you're making 8, just cut it in half, and then quarters. You guys know how to count. Okay. All right. So using my knife, I'm just going to kind of wiggle under one of these triangles and then move it right here onto the pan. Perfect. And just keep doing this until you get all the pieces. You don't have to make these perfect. As long as they are all relatively the same size, they will all bake the same. Something that I like to do with these scones, because I like a little extra spice to things when I'm baking, is I am actually going to sprinkle a little bit of nutmeg, fresh grated nutmeg on these, and as well as cardamom powder. You can incorporate those things into the batter if you want to. I would probably do about 1/4 teaspoon of each for the entire batter, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit onto the top. I've pulled my whole nutmeg and nutmeg grater out of my spice cabinet, and then this right here is grated cardamom powder. Cardamom is like this sweet baking spice. You kind of see it in chai teas a little bit. You know, of course you have chai, but this is also kind of one of those warm spices that people put in their baked goods. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a little sprinkle onto the top of each of these. Makes them a little prettier too. But if you've never tried cardamom before, I guess the closest thing I can relate it to is the chai. But I think once you start using it, you'll love it and you'll never bake without it again. So there's that. So I also like to use a whole nutmeg. I don't like to buy it ground already. The spice flavor is so much fresher if you can grind it yourself. This is just something I've had for a very long time. You can use any of those little grating planes, you know, the ones like micro planes that people have, and they have a, let's see, like a handle, and you can grate right from it. This does the same thing. I'm just gonna grate right on top of to each piece, and don't put oodles of it on it. Nobody wants to bite down into oodles of nutmeg. It might be a little overwhelming, but just a small grate on top of every one of these. It's gonna be wonderful. This is also to die for in any apple pie or pumpkin pie. I don't know why people don't use it more often. So this I'm going to go ahead and put into a 400-degree oven, and they are going to bake for approximately 20 minutes. At that point, I would check them with a toothpick. If they need 2 more minutes, then we'll put them right back in. It also depends a little bit on the size of the scone that you are making, but it also depends on if you are using a regular bake oven or a convection bake oven. If you are using a convection bake oven, wherever the fan is blowing in the back of your oven, I would suggest rotating the pan at least halfway through. That way you get an even brown on all sides. So into the oven we go. So those scones are in the oven for 20 minutes. We'll check them once more with a toothpick, make sure they look perfect, and then we will pull them out, let them cool, and then we will sprinkle them with powdered sugar to really set them off. Oh, lovely. Let me just check them real quick. And as you can see, they are perfectly golden brown on top. They are done, checked them with a toothpick, and they smell wonderful. They make my entire house smell like a bakery. So all I'm gonna do is just kind of let these cool down, and when I'm ready to serve them, then I will sprinkle a little bit of powdered sugar on top just to make them beautiful, and then they will be good to go. My scones have cooled down. We have a cranberry, which is a little bit tart. We have the white chocolate, which is a sweet factor, and then we have that whole-bodied warmness of the cardamom and nutmeg on top of it. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of powdered sugar on top of it here, just for pretty. You can do this with the whole batch too, and you can set it on a platter and have it at breakfast or at brunch, and everybody will go wild over them. I will crack into this just to see how it tastes. And so you can see how kind of light and fluffy this is inside. This is still warm, but see how moist it is inside? And it will be like a light, you know, thing that people won't even know that it's truly gluten-free. So let me know how yours turns out. But in the meantime, I'm gonna eat this.